She is not my mate. 5 words. That was all it took to split me open. I heard them from my knees, wrists bound in iron, surrounded by 200 wolves who would not look at me. The stone floor was cold beneath my shins. The hall was silent, the kind of silence that pressed against the eardrums, that had weight and teeth. They felt it, the bond. 200 wolves tasting the air and catching something primal in it, something that said these two belonged to each other before either of us had spoken a word. And on the throne, the Alpha King, the most feared wolf in the Northern Territories, the man whose heartbeat I could feel echoing inside my own chest like a second pulse, went rigid. I watched it happen. His fingers, resting on the iron armrest, curled inward one at a time until his knuckles were bone-white, a tendon pulled taut in his neck. His pupils blew wide for a fraction of a second, his wolf surging forward, slamming against the cage of his control, and his lips parted around a breath that wasn't quite steady. His wolf recognized me. I felt it, a tremor through the bond so violent it made my teeth ache. The scarred advisor beside the throne leaned in. His voice was low, but I heard every syllable. Sire, the bond. I can feel there's a shift in the Alpha King's jaw locked. The advisor pressed. The wolves sense it. If this woman is your... No. One word. A blade. The advisor flinched back like he'd been struck. The wolves in the hall went still, perfectly, unnaturally still, because they'd felt the bond. They knew, and now they were watching their king deny what every instinct in the room was confirming. And then he looked down at me with eyes the color of winter fog and said it. "She is not my mate," my wolf screamed. Not a sound anyone else could hear. Internal, primal. A howl that started at the base of my spine and clawed upward through my ribs, flooding my throat with heat and my eyes with pressure. The bond, the one that had detonated in my chest the moment I'd looked at him, convulsed, twisted, tried to reach him across the 3 steps of stone that separated the floor from his throne. He felt it. I knew he felt it. His knuckles had gone white enough to crack. His breathing changed, barely perceptible, a hitch he buried beneath the weight of his authority. His wolf was screaming too. I could feel it through the bond pressing against his ribs, howling mine behind a cage built from willpower and terror. No one else saw. They weren't meant to. I saw all of it. And then the Alpha King stood, descended the steps, and stopped close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body like a furnace, close enough that his scent hit me full in the chest, pine and iron and something darker, something animal, something my wolf clawed toward with a desperation that made me dizzy. His hand lifted, just barely. His fingers twitched at his side, reaching, and I watched him catch himself, watched his hand curl into a fist so tight the tendons stood out like cables. His jaw worked once, twice. His nostrils flared, and I saw his chest expand on a breath he held too long, like he was trying to memorize the scent of me and suffocate it at the same time. "Chain her to my throne." The hall erupted into whispers. The guards grabbed my arms, and the Alpha King turned and walked away without looking back. But his stride was wrong. Too fast, too rigid. The walk of a man fleeing something he couldn't outrun because it lived inside his chest. I didn't fight. Not because I was weak. Because I was trying to understand. Because underneath the denial, underneath the stone mask and the flat gray eyes, and the voice that could silence a room, I'd seen something. A flash, a fracture, the briefest flicker of recognition, raw and terrified and wanting. He knew me, and he was lying. 2 hours earlier I'd been walking. The chains came first, then the hands. I'd been moving through the eastern edge of the Ashenmoor border, not crossing it, not technically, staying in the gray zone between pack territories where wolves like me survived, when they found me. 4 border patrol wolves, armed, running in formation. They didn't ask questions, didn't warn me. They hit me from behind, drove me face first into the frozen ground, and locked the iron around my wrists before I'd finished spitting dirt from my mouth. Rogue. The word came from above me, spoken the way someone might say vermin. Trespassing on sovereign territory. I'm not in your territory. My cheek pressed into the frost. I'm in the neutral zone. The neutral zone was absorbed 6 months ago, King's decree. I went cold, not from the ground, from the implications. If the neutral zone was gone, then the last safe passage between the eastern packs had closed, which meant every packless wolf using those routes was either trapped or already taken. Which meant this wasn't an accident. They hauled me up, marched me. 3 days of walking, minimal water, no food, the chains biting my wrists raw with every step. By the second day, the iron had worn through the skin. Blood dried in sticky rings around the metal, raw flesh catching every time my arms swung with my stride. I didn't mention it, didn't slow down or wince. I cataloged the landscape instead. Forest gave way to stone, paths gave way to roads, and the roads led to walls. High walls, black stone, ashen moor. I'd heard stories about the capital, every rogue had. The seat of the Alpha King, the wolf who'd taken his throne with blood 4 years ago and held it with a grip that made even allied packs nervous. The wolf no one challenged. I'd heard his name spoken in whispers at trading posts and campfires. Arlo, the second-born who was never meant to rule. The unstable one, the dangerous one. The one I'd sat across from at a rough wooden table 5 years ago and shared bread with. I hadn't thought about that day in a long time. I'd trained myself not to. The memory was a bruise I'd learned not to press, because pressing it meant remembering what it cost me, and the cost had been everything. But now, walking toward his castle in chains, the memory pressed itself. 5 years ago, the trading post at the Greymarch. I'd been 20, newly packless, bartering dried meat for a blanket. He'd been there too, younger, leaner, vibrating with a barely contained energy that cleared a 10-foot radius around him. 2 handlers flanked him at a distance, watching him the way you'd watch a weapon that hadn't been properly secured. Every wolf in that trading post gave him space, not deference, fear. I'd been looking for a place to sit. The only empty seat was across from him. Anyone with survival instincts would have stayed away. I sat down. His head snapped up. Those eyes, pale gray, almost silver, sharp enough to cut, locked onto me with an intensity that should have made me run. "You're in the wrong seat," he said. "It's the only empty one. It's empty for a reason. Because they're afraid of you." Something moved behind his eyes. Surprise. The expression of a person who'd forgotten what it felt like to be spoken to directly. "They should be," he said. "Maybe." I set my pack down, but I've been walking for 4 days and I'm going to sit regardless. He stared at me. I held his gaze, not with defiance, not with submission. I just looked at him, person to person, the way nobody else in that room was willing to do. He didn't tell me to leave. We sat in near silence. I ate. He didn't. At one point, I pushed a piece of bread across the table toward him, and he looked at it like it might be poisoned. "It's bread," I said, "not a trap." He took it, ate slowly, watching me over every bite, waiting for the trick, the betrayal, the moment this would prove to be something other than what it appeared. It never did. I left an hour later. I should have left sooner. I'd already drawn too much attention, already stayed longer than was safe for a packless wolf sitting with someone that volatile. But he'd been eating like a man who couldn't remember the last time someone had offered him something freely, and I couldn't make myself stand up while that look was still on his face. That was always my problem. Staying too long, giving too much, caring about things that would cost me. As I passed him, close enough to feel the heat coming off his body, he caught my wrist. Not hard, not threatening. His fingers closed around the bones of my wrist, gentle, precise, almost reverent, and the contact sent a jolt through me so sharp I stopped breathing. His thumb pressed against my pulse, just once, like he was checking whether I was real. "What's your name?" His voice was rough, lower than before. "Amy." His thumb moved across my pulse one more time. Then he let go. His hand dropped to the table like it weighed 100 pounds, and his fingers curled into a fist where my wrist had been. I felt his gaze on my back like a brand until I turned the corner and disappeared. 3 days later, the pack controlling that stretch of border found out I'd been seen with the Ashenmore second-born. They decided sitting with him meant alliance, meant threat. They drove me out, teeth in fury, chased me through the Greymarch until I was bleeding and lost. I barely survived the night. I lost my trading contacts, lost the safe passage I'd spent a year negotiating, lost the fragile web of survival that had been keeping me alive. All because I sat down when I should have walked away. I'd never regretted it, not once, not even when the cost had been everything. That was the part I couldn't explain, and the part that should have warned me about what I was. Now, 5 years later, the guards shoved me through the castle gates, upstairs, through corridors of black stone that smelled like iron and old blood, and into the throne room. The hall opened before me, massive, vaulted, held up by pillars carved with wolves in mid-hunt. Torches threw jagged shadows across 200 wolves gathered in formation along a center aisle that ended at a raised stone platform, and on that platform sat a throne of rough forged iron. And on that throne sat the man I'd shared bread with. Except he wasn't that man anymore. He was enormous. Not just tall, massive. Shoulders that blocked the torchlight behind him. Arms resting on the throne's edges with the stillness of absolute power. His jaw was cut from stone. His mouth a flat line. His hair dark, pushed back, a few strands falling across his forehead. His eyes, those same pale gray eyes, found me the moment I crossed the threshold. No, before that. He'd felt me before I entered. I was sure of it. His body had gone taut on the throne a full second before the doors opened. I saw the residual tension when I looked up, the aftermath of a reaction he'd already buried. The guards forced me to my knees, stone cracked against my kneecaps. I didn't make a sound. "Alpha King." The guard spoke with his head bowed. "The rogue found near the eastern border, brought alive as ordered." As ordered, I filed that away. He'd specifically asked them to bring me alive. I looked up. He watched me the way a predator watches something it has already decided belongs to it. His fingers curled around the edge of his throne, one at a time. Slow. A man holding onto the only solid thing in a room that was tilting. And the bond hit. Heat, sudden, violent, flooding through my ribs and up into my throat. My wolf surged forward so hard my vision blurred. Every nerve ending in my body caught fire. The world narrowed to a single point. Him. His heartbeat. His scent. The way his chest moved when he breathed. Everything else, the hall, the crowd, the chains, the pain in my knees, dissolved into static. Mate. The word slammed through me like a fist to the sternum. My lungs seized. My wolf howled, not in distress, in recognition. On the throne, his knuckles went white. A muscle in his jaw flexed. His breathing changed. I caught the shift, the barely perceptible hitch, the way his chest locked for one beat before he forced it to continue. His wolf was clawing at him. I could feel it. A pressure in the air, a tremor in the bond, the silent war between the man on the throne and the animal inside him. His wolf slammed forward. I felt the vibration of it through the invisible thread now strung between us. Hot and electric and desperate. His hand gripped the armrest so hard the iron groaned. And then he crushed it. I watched it happen in real time. Watched the soul, and decide consciously and completely to deny me. You already know the words. You already know about the chains, the throne, the door closing behind him. What you don't know is what happened after. And what you don't know is that when the guards dragged me to the base of his throne and locked the chain around my wrists, I looked at the blood on the iron armrest where his grip had cracked his own skin, and I felt sorry for him. That was always my problem. Even when someone was hurting me, I couldn't stop seeing their pain first. They gave me water once, hours later. A guard set a tin cup beside me without looking at me and walked away. "Thank you," I said, to a man who wouldn't meet my eyes, who served a king that had just chained me to a throne and called me nothing. I drank it in 3 swallows. The hall had emptied. A handful of guards remained at the doors, and a servant had snuffed half the torches, leaving the room dim and amber-edged. I tested the chain. Heavy iron links, each thick as my thumb, threaded through a bolt in the stone that didn't give. The cuffs allowed a radius of maybe 4 feet. I could sit, stand, or lie down. I could touch the base of the throne. I could not reach the steps, a cage with no walls. I sat with my back against the throne and drew my knees up. My body was a catalog of complaints: bruised knees, raw wrists, dehydration headache, 3 days of no food. The iron cuffs pressed into the wounds on my wrists, and every time I shifted, the raw flesh opened again. I positioned the chain so the weight rested on the least damaged skin and didn't look at the blood. No one was going to tend to it, and mentioning it would accomplish nothing except confirming what every wolf in this court already believed, that I was weak. The bond was a wound, not a metaphor, an actual physical wound. It ached, a low, persistent pull behind my sternum, like a hook embedded in my rib cage, the lines strung taut toward wherever he was in this castle. The denial made it worse. Every minute he spent rejecting it, the ache deepened, spreading from my chest into my shoulders, down my arms, settling into my bones like a fever. My hands trembled, not from cold, from suppression. My body was physically fighting to reach him, and I was holding it still by force. I closed my eyes. The bond pulsed, steady, insistent, a second heartbeat that wasn't mine. I could feel him somewhere above me, moving, restless, his wolf pacing inside him the way mine was pacing inside me. Stop, I told myself. Stop tracking him. Stop feeling him. Stop wanting. A sharp pain lanced through my chest, sudden, blinding. I gasped, pressing my hand flat against my sternum. The bond was punishing me for trying to suppress it. My vision swam. For a moment, I couldn't breathe at all, my lungs locked against my ribs like they'd forgotten how to expand. Then it passed, left me panting, left me understanding something new. The bond wasn't a suggestion. It was a demand, and denying it came with a cost measured in blood and bone. Footsteps. My eyes snapped open. The hall was dark, the torches nearly dead. The guards at the far doors were shadows, but the footsteps came from behind me, from the side corridor that led to the private quarters. He didn't enter the hall. He stopped in the doorway, half swallowed by shadow. I couldn't see him, but the bond told me exactly where he stood, 7 feet back, left shoulder against the stone frame, weight on his right leg. Every cell in my body oriented toward him like a compass needle swinging north. He stood there for a long time, watching me. The bond throbbed, not with the controlled king. Something raw, something that only existed in the dark, when the court was empty and the mask couldn't hold. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I let the silence fill with everything he wasn't saying, and held perfectly still while the most powerful man in the Northern Territories stood in a dark doorway and looked at the woman he'd just denied. His breathing was audible. Barely. A rough, controlled rhythm that hitched once, just once, and the bond surged with it. Want. Raw, undisciplined, staggering want. His wolf pressing against his ribs, whining, straining toward me. I heard his hand hit the stone doorframe, hard, the sound of a man bracing himself against something. Then a second sound, low, involuntary, pressed through his teeth. Not a word, a sound his body made without his permission. The kind of sound that comes from a man watching something he wants more than oxygen and refusing to take a single step closer. Then he turned and disappeared. I exhaled. My hands were trembling. He remembered me, I was certain now, and whatever mask he wore in the daylight, in the dark, He couldn't stay away. Morning came gray. The hall filled. Advisors first. 7 of them, the scarred one called Theron among them. Then warriors. Then servants. I pulled myself upright against the throne. My body screamed. My back had locked during the night. My knees were swollen, and the dehydration headache had bloomed into something vicious behind my eyes. But worse than any of it was the bond. Overnight, the denied connection had deepened into something that felt like a physical illness. A low-grade nausea, a tremor in my hands I couldn't fully control, a sensitivity to sound and light that made the filling hall feel like an assault. I swallowed it all, straightened my spine, set my jaw. I would not be found lying down. He arrived without announcement. One moment the doorway was empty, and the next he filled it, moving through the hall with a stride that rearranged every person in the room around him. Black clothing, always black. He climbed the platform, sat in the throne. The iron groaned. I was at his feet, close enough to see the stitching on his boots, close enough to feel heat radiating from his body, close enough that his scent washed over me, pine and iron and that dark, animal undertone, and my wolf lunged toward the bonds so hard I had to close my eyes and lock my jaw to keep from making a sound. The proximity was a cruelty I hadn't anticipated. The bond wanted him closer, wanted contact, wanted the press of skin against skin that would quiet the screaming inside my chest. Being 3 feet from him and not touching him was worse than being on the other side of the castle. It was like holding your hand over a flame, close enough to feel the heat, too close to escape the burn, not close enough to get what you actually needed. He didn't look down, but his boot shifted, a fraction of an inch, toward me, then stopped, and his hand, the one resting on the armrest closest to me, opened. Just slightly, his fingers uncurling, spreading, reaching toward the edge where my head almost rested against the iron. The tips of his fingers hovered over the metal for 1 breath. 2. Then he pulled them back, curled them under, pressed them against the iron until the knuckles whitened. No one in the court saw it, but I was 3 feet below his hand, and I felt the heat of his fingers like a phantom touch on my scalp. Theron begin. The council session unfolded. Border disputes, trade agreements, military positioning. His decisions came instant, no deliberation, no consulting. He ran his kingdom the way he occupied space, with total, uncompromising authority. And I noticed something. No one looked at me. Not the advisors, not the warriors, not the servants who moved along the walls like ghosts. The Alpha King had chained a woman to his throne and told the entire court she was nothing. Looking at me was the same as questioning him. No one questioned him. Hours passed, my stomach cramped, my vision swam, the headache had teeth now. At some point a servant brought food to the platform. For the king. Roasted meat, dark bread, stewed vegetables. The smell hit me like a wall. My mouth flooded. My stomach seized hard enough that I had to close my eyes and breathe through it. I pressed my hand flat against my abdomen and held very still. I would not let them see me hungry. When I opened my eyes, a plate sat on the floor beside me. I stared at it. Meat, bread, a cup of water, the same food from his tray. Set beside me so quietly I hadn't noticed the moment of transfer. I looked up. He wasn't looking at me. He was listening to Theron describe Western fortifications, his expression flat, his posture unchanged. But through the bond, quick, involuntary, immediately suppressed. Not pity, something closer to fury, at himself, at the situation, at the fact that the woman his wolf had claimed was sitting at his feet with hunger cramps and he'd let it happen for hours. I ate slowly, deliberately, and when I finished, when the food sharpened my mind and clarity returned, so did anger. I was chained to a throne because a man had decided I wasn't his mate. Except he was lying. He knew it, and I knew it, and every wolf in this hall had felt it. I set the plate aside and sat up straighter. He was going to crack. I didn't know when or what would cause it, but the fissures were already forming. And I would be watching when it happened. 3 days chained. That was when things shifted. On the 3rd morning, the scarred advisor Theron approached the platform alone. He crouched in front of me, the first person other than the king who had directly acknowledged my existence. "You need to bathe," he said. "I need these chains off." "That won't happen. Then I'll stay dirty." Something close to a smile crossed his face. "The king ordered you cleaned and fed. You'll be taken to a washroom under guard." "The king ordered Shend. He doesn't keep prisoner at one. In middle ground." He held my gaze. "You're the exception. Think about what that means." He stood and walked away before I could respond. I thought about what it meant. I thought about how I should be furious, degraded, objectified, reduced to an exception in a tyrant's system. And I was. I was all of those things. But underneath the fury, in the part of me I couldn't control, I thought, he couldn't let me go. He couldn't execute me and couldn't exile me and couldn't claim me. So he'd built a cage at the foot of his throne and told himself it was punishment instead of what it actually was. The closest he'd allow himself to keeping me. I hated that I understood him. The washroom was underground, stone basin, steaming water. A tall female guard named Sarah stood at the door with her back turned. "Be fast," Sarah said. I stripped and stepped in. The heat hit my skin like absolution. I gripped the edge of the basin and stood there, letting warmth seep into bones that had been cold for 3 days. The water stung the wounds on my wrists. I'd been hiding how bad they'd gotten, the iron wearing the skin down to raw pink flesh and rings around both arms. I cleaned them carefully, biting the inside of my cheek against the pain, and said nothing. I scrubbed, washed my hair, dressed in clean clothes, gray tunic, dark trousers, leather boots, no pack insignia, no colors, the clothes of someone who belonged to no one, or to the throne. When I returned, he was already seated. The council was in progress. I was rechained and I sat down, clean, warm, alert, and felt the moment he noticed. Not a slight catch in his breathing, a sharp one. His response to Theron died mid-sentence. A full second of silence where the Alpha King, the man who never hesitated, never stumbled, never lost a single beat of control, forgot what he was saying. His eyes didn't move, didn't flicker toward me. But the bond didn't just ripple, it detonated. A pulse of heat so raw, so nakedly wanting that my face flushed and my hands fisted in my lap. His wolf had surged forward, not nudged, not pressed, lunged. I felt the echo of it slam through my chest like a second heartbeat, his animal straining toward mine through the bond, every barrier he'd built shaking under the force of it. The clean clothes, the damp hair, the way the gray tunic pulled across my shoulders. He'd ordered the bath. He'd ordered someone to take care of me because he couldn't do it himself without cracking. And now the evidence of that care was sitting at his feet, and his wolf was losing its mind. Theron cleared his throat. "Sire?" "Continue." Flat, controlled, as if the last second hadn't happened, but his hand on the armrest was shaking. I could see the tremor from where I sat. I kept my eyes forward and let him suffer. That afternoon, the atmosphere changed. A man I hadn't seen before entered the hall. Not an advisor or warrior, his clothes were richer, cut in a different style, and he carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who believed he was untouchable. "Ambassador Raylan," Theron announced cautiously, "from the Valen Alliance." The ambassador strode forward, smiling. Dark skin, sharp cheekbones, hair pulled back, a silver cuff on one ear. He bowed to the throne, shallow, performative. "King Arlo, I bring revised terms for the Southern Trade Agreement." I said no summit, not a summit. Consider it a personal visit. Raylan's gaze swept the room and stopped on me. A full, deliberate look, taking in the chains, the position at the king's feet, my face. His eyes traveled slowly, assessing, not lewd, but not polite either, the appraisal of a man who looked at people and saw assets. "Well?" His smile widened. "This is new." The temperature in the room dropped, not figuratively. I felt it, a physical shift in pressure, as though the air itself had thickened. The guards along the walls straightened. Theron took half a step back. and through the bond I felt something that made my blood go cold. Rage, not anger, not irritation, rage. The kind that starts in the animal brain and floods upward before the conscious mind can catch it. Arlo's wolf didn't surge forward. It detonated. I felt the shockwave through the bond like a physical blow, possessive, territorial, savage, a wolf watching another male look at its mate and losing every scrap of rational thought to the single, screaming imperative, destroy. But it was the silence that terrified me most. The Alpha King hadn't moved, hadn't tensed visibly, but his stillness had changed from the stillness of control to the stillness of something about to strike. His fingers had stopped moving, his breathing had stopped entirely, the iron armrest under his right hand cracked. Not groaned, cracked. A hairline fracture spidering through the metal loud enough that Theron's head snapped toward the sound. Raylan didn't notice. The court did. "Your revised terms, Ambassador," he said, quieter than he'd been all day, quiet the way a blade is quiet. Raylan held his gaze on me a beat too long. "Forgive my curiosity. It isn't every day one sees a woman in chains at a king's feet. Is she a prisoner or an ornament? She is neither your concern nor your conversation." "A prisoner, then." Raylan's tone stayed light, amused. He reached for a document in his coat. "Your trade routes. Leave the document with Theron. Your audience is over." Raylan blinked. "I've traveled 4, and you looked at something that doesn't belong to you. Doesn't belong to you, not something I don't care about. Not a prisoner of the court, something that doesn't belong to you, possessive, specific, a claim wrapped in the language of denial." The words hit the room like a shockwave. I saw 3 advisors exchange glances. Saw Theron close his eyes briefly, the resignation of a man who'd just watched his king confirm the thing he was supposed to be denying. Through the bond, I felt Arlo catch it, the slip, the exposure, and felt the answering spike of fury at himself. Raylan's amusement sharpened, calculating. My apologies," he said, setting the document down. He turned to leave, but he didn't leave cleanly. As he passed the platform, close enough for only me and the nearest guards to hear, he murmured, "If you ever tire of chains, the Valen Alliance treats its women rather differently." He was 3 steps past me when the Alpha King moved. Not spoke, moved. He was off the throne before I registered the motion, a blur of black, the sound of iron groaning as his weight left it, and then he was on the hall floor between Raylan and the door, and the ambassador walked directly into the wall of him. Raylan staggered back. The diplomatic smile vanished. Arlo stood over him. Close, too close, towering over the man with the contained violence of a storm held back by a thread. His wolf was so close to the surface that the air around him felt different, heavier, charged, the way the atmosphere changes before lightning strikes. He didn't raise his voice. "You spoke to her." You spoke to her directly, in my hall, at my throne." His voice was barely above a murmur, and it was the most terrifying sound I'd ever heard, because underneath the control, I could hear the wolf, pressing against the words, leaking through the consonants. "You looked at her, you addressed her, you offered her something." His hand came up, not fast, slow, deliberate. He gripped Raylan's jaw, not to hurt, not yet, and tilted the ambassador's face toward him with the casual precision of a man examining something he was deciding whether to break. "If you speak to her again," Arlo said, his thumb pressing into the hinge of Raylan's jaw, "I will remove your tongue, and I will do it personally, and I will enjoy it." He let go. Raylan's knees buckled. "Remove him." The guards took Raylan's arms. The ambassador's composure cracked, real visible fear, before the diplomatic mask slid back into place. He let himself be led away. The hall doors closed behind him. The room exhaled. Arlo stood where he was for 3 heartbeats, then he turned and climbed back to the throne. Sat down. The iron groaned under his weight. He didn't look at me, but as he passed, close enough that his scent washed over me. I heard the sound. Low, barely audible, not a word, a growl. Pressed low in his chest, heavy enough that I felt it in the stone beneath me. The growl of a wolf that had just watched another male get close to something it considered its own. Through the bond I felt the aftermath, the rage collapsing into something raw and shaken. He knew what he'd done. He knew the entire room had watched him lose control over a woman he claimed was nothing. And I, because something was broken in me that made me care about the wrong people at the wrong time, felt the urge to comfort him. He'd chained me to a floor, denied me in front of 200 wolves, left me hungry and bleeding and invisible for 3 days. I swallowed the impulse, pressed my back against the throne. But it had been there, and I hated myself for it. 2 nights later, a warrior got too close. It was late, past midnight, the hall dim, only a skeleton guarded the doors. I was awake, sitting against the throne, when I heard movement from the main floor. A young wolf, early 20s, broad-shouldered, wearing the leather of a scout, approached the platform. Curious, like a man who'd been thinking about the woman chained to the king's throne and decided to satisfy his curiosity. He stopped at the base of the steps. "You're the rogue." I said nothing. I've never seen anyone chained here before. What did you do? Existed. He smiled, almost charming. "I'm Darian. I run the Eastern Patrol. If you need anything, water, a blanket." "She needs nothing from you." The voice came from the shadow of the side corridor. Low, absolute, the kind of quiet that carried the promise of consequence. Darian went rigid, his face drained of color. The Alpha King stepped from the darkness. He moved with the fluid precision of something designed to hunt. No wasted motion, no hesitation. He stopped at the top of the platform steps, looking down at the scout the way you'd look at something you were about to erase. Through the bond, his wolf hadn't just surged. It had taken over. Territorial, possessive, a male wolf that had found another male on his platform near his mate in the dark, operating on instinct so primal it predated language. His heartbeat through the bond was too fast, way too fast for a man standing that still. "Alpha," Darian started. "You're on the platform. You're on my platform near my prisoner after midnight without authorization. My. Not the my. Remove him," Arlo said. The guards had Darian by both arms within seconds. The scout's eyes were wide, locked on the king's face, searching for mercy. There was none. "Reassign his patrol, western perimeter, effective immediately." Darian was taken. The hall doors closed. Silence returned. The Alpha King descended the platform steps and stopped, 3 feet away, the invisible line that marked the edge of what he allowed himself. "He wasn't a threat," I said quietly. "He was near you. He was offering water. He was near you." Repeated, final, not tactical, primal. His wolf speaking through his mouth before his mind could catch it. I watched his face as the awareness hit, the realization of what he'd just said, how he'd said it, what it revealed. A flicker of something that might have been horror crossed his expression before the mask slammed back into place. He turned to leave. "Arlo." He stopped. His back was to me, his shoulders locked. "I can feel what you're feeling," I said, "through the bond. Right now. I can feel all of it." He didn't turn around. "Every time you deny this, it gets worse. Not just for me, for you. The pain in your chest, the one you've been ignoring for 3 days, I can feel it. You're hurting yourself." His hands hanging at his sides curled into fists. I could see them shaking. "Stop talking." His voice was wrecked. "No." He turned, and the look on his face, God, the look on his face. Not the king, not the mask. A man in agony. Eyes burning silver, his wolf so close to the surface his irises had changed color. His chest heaving, a vein pulsing in his neck. "Do you have any idea," he said, each word dragged out of him like it had hooks, what it takes to sit on that throne with you 3 feet away and not touch you. The rawness of it hit me like a blow. Every breath you take, he continued, his voice cracking at the edges. I feel it. Every time your heart beats, mine answers. When you sleep, I can't. Because the bond reaches for you and I have to hold it back, and it is destroying me, Amy. It is eating me alive. He took a step toward me, then caught himself. His hand hit the pillar beside him, hard, and he gripped it like an anchor. If I touch you, he said, I will not stop. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. Then don't stop, I whispered. He moved, fast, so fast I barely tracked it. He was across the space in one motion, one hand braced against the throne above my head, the other at the side of my neck, fingers sliding into my hair, his palm pressed against the pulse hammering beneath my jaw. His face was inches from mine. His eyes burned, pale gray gone almost white, his wolf so close to the surface it had changed the color of his irises. His breath was hot against my mouth. I could feel the tremor running through his arm, the effort of holding himself back with one hand while the other held me close. His fingers tightened in my hair. Not pulling, anchoring, like he needed something to grip that wasn't me. The bond detonated. I gasped. It hit us both, a rush of heat and raw connection that went beyond physical. I felt him, not just his hand, him. His heartbeat, his wolf, his fear, his want. The wall between us dissolved to nothing, and for 5 seconds I was inside his silence and he was inside mine, and I understood, with perfect, devastating clarity, the size of what he was fighting. He wasn't fighting the bond. He was fighting himself. The part that wanted to claim me so badly his teeth ached, the part that had been alone so long the idea of belonging to someone felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, the part that was certain that anything he loved would be destroyed because of him. His thumb traced across my pulse, slow, deliberate, his head tilted, his mouth grazing the edge of my jaw. Not a kiss, not quite. Moving downward, toward the curve of my neck, toward the place where a mate bond was sealed. I felt his teeth graze my skin. Not a bite, the ghost of one. The suggestion. His wolf, seconds from claiming me, the mark practically burning at the tips of his canines. I felt the pressure, real, physical, the points of his teeth pressed against the spot where my pulse fluttered, and my wolf keened, wanting it so badly my whole body arched toward him. His other hand found my waist, gripped, pulled me closer until there was no space between us, his chest against mine, his heartbeat slamming through both of us, the bond screaming, yes, yes, finish it, complete it, let me in. Then he stopped. A sound tore out of him, something between a groan and a snarl, raw and wrecked and furious at himself. He pulled back. His hand left my neck. He stood, stepped away, and stood with his back to me, breathing in short, savage bursts. His fists were clenched at his sides. I could see them shaking. That can't happen again, he said. His voice was destroyed. He left. I sat against the throne with one hand pressed to the place on my neck where his teeth had been. My pulse hammered under my fingertips. The ghost of his almost claim burned on my skin like a brand. My wolf whimpered, a long, low sound inside my chest, the sound of something offered and taken away. 5 seconds of contact, and it had unraveled everything. He wanted me the way fire wanted air, and he had just proven that every wall he'd built was one match away from ash. He came back that same night. 2 hours later, I heard his footsteps, nearly silent, but I'd learned to listen for them the way your body learns to listen for the thing it needs before your mind admits to needing it. This time, he didn't stay in the doorway. He stepped onto the platform and sat down on the stone floor beside the throne, opposite side from me, his back against the iron, his legs stretched out, 6 feet between us. I didn't speak first. Raylan isn't just an ambassador. His voice came low, barely above a murmur, meant for my ears only. He's their spy master. Every word, Every smile, he's mapping this court, identifying weaknesses. And you just showed him one. Silence. Through the bond, I felt the shame, bright, corrosive, laced with fury. Yes, he said. Is that why you came tonight? Because you're angry at yourself? I came because I can't not come. The rawness of it hit me in the center of my chest. No deflection, no strategy, just a man admitting to something that terrified him. If you claim me, I said, what happens, specifically? The bond completes. You become tied to me, not just emotionally, physically. If I'm injured, you feel it. If I'm compromised, you're compromised. And every enemy I have, and I have many, Amy, will know. They'll feel the shift, they'll smell it, and they'll come for you. Not to kill you, to use you, to break you in front of me so they can watch what it does. And you've seen that happen before. My father's mate was taken by a rival pack when I was 9. They held her for 6 days. By the time he got her back, he stopped. The silence was thick enough to choke on. She wasn't the same, I finished. Neither was he. He lasted another year before the weakness of the bond killed him. Their deaths destabilized Ashenmore for a decade. His voice hardened. I will not be that story. So you deny me instead. I keep you alive instead. And the chains, the floor, keeping me at your feet? A beat. That's weakness. The honesty floored me. The chains weren't strategy. They were his wolf's refusal to let me out of its sight, and him finding the only compromise between claiming me and losing me. Arlo. Don't say my name, not like that. Why? Because the sound of it in your voice is the closest thing to a claim I've ever felt, and if you do it again, I will not walk away. Silence. I should have stopped. Arlo. He didn't move this time, but the sound he made, low, wrecked, barely human, told me exactly what it cost him to stay where he was. You're going to be the end of me, he said, or the beginning. He didn't answer, but he didn't leave. We sat in the dark, 6 feet apart, the bond humming between us like a live wire, and in the silence something shifted, not the desperate, violent pull of before. Something quieter, something that said, I'm here without demanding anything else. It was the most dangerous thing that had happened yet. Because I could survive his denial. I could survive his distance. I wasn't sure I could survive his tenderness. His breath didn't steady when he pulled back. It worsened, turning uneven, like stepping away from me had cost him something his body didn't know how to recover from. Don't do that again, he said. But there was no command in his voice, only strain. Something tight and barely held together, like the words themselves were the only thing keeping him from breaking. I didn't answer. I couldn't, because he was still there, still close. Close enough that every breath he took brushed against my mouth, warm and unsteady. Close enough that the bond no longer felt like something inside me, but something stretched between us. Tightening, pulling, demanding with every second neither of us moved. His gaze dropped, not to the chains, to my mouth, and he stilled. I felt it then, the exact moment his control slipped. Not completely, not enough to shatter, but enough to fracture, enough to let something dangerous bleed through. His hand returned to my jaw, slower this time, as though he were giving himself space to stop, to think, to choose restraint. He didn't. His thumb brushed my lower lip. And that, God, that was a mistake. We both felt it. The bond snapped tight, heat surging through me in a rush so sharp it stole my breath, something deep and instinctive rising between us with a force that erased thought entirely. Amy. My name didn't sound like a word in his mouth. It sounded like a warning, or maybe a prayer, something fragile wrapped in desperation. I should have moved. I didn't. Tell me to stop, he said again. Softer now, closer, his forehead nearly touching mine, his voice fraying at the edges. But his body had already betrayed him. His hand tightened at my jaw. His breath hitched in his mouth. His mouth was right there, close enough that I could feel the heat of it, the hesitation, the pull. 1 inch, 2 heartbeats, And then he turned his head at the last possible second. His mouth brushed the corner of mine. Not a kiss, something worse, a ghost of one, the kind that lingers, the kind that settles into your body and refuses to leave, like a memory that was never fully made but somehow impossible to forget. His grip tightened, like he was holding himself in place through sheer force. "I can't," he said, his voice breaking now, stripped raw. "If I start, I won't stop." And then he stepped back, not cleanly, not easily, but like it hurt him to do it. Because it did. He didn't come the next night, or the night after, or the 3 nights after that. The bond didn't care about his absence. Distance didn't mute it, it amplified it. Every hour he stayed away, the ache in my chest grew heavier. Not sharp anymore. Heavy. Like something was slowly filling my lungs, compressing my breath, taking up space meant for air. By the second day of his absence, the tremors started. Not visible, not yet, but I could feel them under my skin. A constant vibration, like standing too close to something that was about to explode. My hands shook when I tried to hold still. My jaw ached from clenching it. At night, the bond pulled so hard I woke gasping, drenched in sweat, my wolf howling inside me with a sound that felt like it was shredding my insides. The denied bond was eating me alive. I tracked him without meaning to. During council sessions, I knew the exact moment he entered the corridor before the doors opened. I knew when his mood shifted, felt the spike of cold when an advisor displeased him, the brief warmth when Theron said something that earned a near smile. I knew when he slept because the bond softened in the small hours and I could feel the edge of his dreams. Restless, dark, never peaceful. And I knew he was tracking me too. Sometimes in the middle of the night the bond would flare. A single pulse of awareness, intense and focused, like someone pressing their hand against glass. He was reaching for me, checking, making sure I was still there, then pulling back before I could reach back. The daytime sessions continued with mechanical precision. He sat on the throne, I sat at its base. He acted as though I was furniture. He was colder than before, actively cold. The fractional glances I'd grown accustomed to were gone. His eyes moved through the room and passed over my position like it was empty space. His voice was flatter, harder, stripped of even the controlled warmth he'd shown advisors. He was punishing himself, and the punishment was punishing me. The food still came, but the dried blackberries I'd found tucked beside the bread in recent meals were gone. The warm herbal drink that had replaced water in the mornings was gone. Just bread, meat, water. He was stripping the arrangement down to its barest function, as if peeling away every evidence of care would make him care less. It wasn't working. Through the bond, muted now, dampened by his deliberate withdrawal, I still felt the pressure, building, day by day, and me, I adapted. I always adapted. I minimized, told myself the stone floor wasn't that cold, told myself the ache in my chest was manageable, told myself I didn't need the blackberries or the warm drink or the fractional glances that made my wolf settle. I was so good at surviving that I sometimes forgot I was suffering. On the 4th morning of his absence, the bond broke something. I'd been sitting upright during a council session, spine straight, face composed, performing strength the way I'd been performing it for 6 years, when the first wave hit. It started as a pain behind my eyes, sharp, sudden, like a needle driven through my temple. I blinked, breathed through it, the pain receded, then came back. Worse. A vice closing around my skull, and underneath it the bond, the suppressed, denied, starving bond, convulsing, like a muscle that had been held taut for too long and was finally seizing. My hands curled in my lap, my vision doubled. Not now, not here. The second wave dropped me. I didn't faint. It was worse than fainting. My body simply stopped cooperating. My muscles locked. My lungs seized. The bond, starved of completion and strained past its breaking point, sent a cascade of pain through every nerve in my body. A full system rejection, my wolf and my body screaming in unison that the denial had gone too far, that the distance was killing us, that the suppression had reached a threshold no living thing could sustain. I pitched forward. My hands hit the stone floor. The chain rattled. My arms gave out and I collapsed, cheek against cold stone, body shaking, unable to draw a full breath. The pain was everywhere. Behind my eyes, in my chest, in my bones. The bond was a wire pulled so tight it was cutting me in half. The hall went silent. I heard chairs scraping. Heard Theron's voice, sharp, commanding, "Someone get..." But the sound that cut through everything else was the throne. The iron screamed as the Alpha King launched himself upright. The throne scraped back against the stone platform with a sound like a blade being drawn. Through the agony, through the haze, I felt the bond explode from his end. Not the controlled pulses I'd grown accustomed to. A full detonation. Every wall he'd built, every suppression, every coldly maintained distance, obliterated in a single second by the sight of me on the floor. His wolf took over. I heard the growl first. Low, sustained building. The sound of 200 wolves hearing their alpha's animal voice and going utterly still. Not a sound of anger. A sound of distress. A male wolf whose mate was hurt, whose mate was on the ground, whose mate was suffering because of what he'd done. Then his hands were on me. He was on the floor. On his knees. On the stone platform of his own throne room, in front of his entire court, his hands cradling my face, turning me toward him. His eyes were silver, fully silver. His wolf so far forward the man was barely visible behind it. "Amy," his voice cracked. "Amy." I couldn't answer. The pain had stolen my voice. I could only look at him through blurred vision, shaking, my hands fisted against the stone. His hand found my chest, pressed flat against my sternum, over the bond, and he did something I felt him do, something deliberate, something that cost him. He opened the connection, not all the way, not a claim, but the wall he'd been holding against the bond, the one that had been suffocating both of us for days. He dropped it. Warmth flooded through me. His warmth. His wolf pressing against the bond with desperate whining urgency. The pain didn't vanish. It cracked, shattered, broke apart into pieces that his warmth rushed in to fill. My lungs unlocked, my vision cleared. I gasped, a raw, desperate sound, and my hand came up to grip his wrist where it pressed against my chest. "Don't let go," I said. My voice was a wreck. His jaw locked. His other hand was in my hair, cradling my head off the stone. His thumb stroked my temple. Through the bond, I felt what he was feeling. Horror. Self-hatred. The sickening realization that his denial had done this, that his walls had nearly destroyed me. And underneath all of it, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep hurting her. I can't. The hall was frozen. 200 wolves watching their Alpha King kneel on a stone floor, cradling a woman he'd publicly declared was nothing, his wolf keening through the bond loudly enough that every wolf in the room could feel it. Theron stepped onto the platform. "Sire, careful, measured. The court, clear it. Sire, clear the hall." The command hit the room like a wall of force. Wolves moved. Fast. Chairs scraped, boots thudded, the hall emptied in under a minute. Theron was the last to leave. I saw his face as he passed, not surprise. Grief. The grief of a man who'd watched this coming and hadn't been able to stop it. The doors closed. Silence. He didn't let go. His hand stayed on my chest. His other hand still cradled my head. We were on the floor of an empty throne room, the chains pooling around us like iron vines, and for the first time since I'd been dragged into his court, there was no audience. No performance. Just us. "How long?" he said. His voice was barely holding. "How long has it been doing this to you?" "Days. It started after you pulled back." His eyes closed. His jaw worked. Through the bond, I felt the self-hatred spike so hard it made me wince. "Don't," I said. I gripped his wrist harder. "Don't do that to yourself. I did this to you. The bond did this because you tried to strangle it. I tried to strangle it. I made that choice, and it nearly—" He couldn't finish. His hand trembled against my chest. I sat up, slowly. He tried to push me back down. I pushed his hand away. "I'm fine. You were seizing on a stone floor, and now I'm sitting up. Help me or get out of the way." He helped me sit. We ended up facing each other on the platform, my back against the throne, his back against nothing. His hand was still hovering near my shoulder, not touching, not quite, like a man afraid to let go of something he wasn't allowed to hold. The silence should have been a truce. It wasn't, because his eyes, red-rimmed, wrecked, full of guilt, were looking at me with that same expression, the one that wanted me and denied me in the same breath, the one that reached for me in the dark and pretended I didn't exist in the light, the one that was already rebuilding the wall, right there, sitting on the floor with my collapse still wet on the stone. I felt it through the bond, the guilt reshaping itself into resolve, the self-hatred hardening into the same cold logic that had nearly killed me. He was going to do it again. Something inside me snapped. Not the bond, not grief, something older, something that had been building since the moment he'd looked at me on this throne and lied. "No," I said. He blinked. "No what? I can feel you doing it, right now. You're sitting here looking at me like your heart is breaking and you're already figuring out how to pull back again, how to be colder, how to make the distance work this time." His mouth opened. I didn't let him speak. "You don't get to do that." My voice was shaking, not with weakness, with something far more dangerous. "You don't get to almost claim me in the dark and pretend I'm furniture in the daylight. You don't get to pull the blackberries from my plate and tell yourself that fixes anything. You don't get to want me and deny me at the same time, Arlo. You don't get to have both." His face went white. "I just collapsed on your floor, in front of your entire court, because the bond you keep strangling is tearing me apart from the inside." I leaned forward. My chains dragged against the stone. "And the worst part isn't the pain. The worst part is that I can feel you suffering too. Every single night I can feel your wolf screaming. And you still won't do anything about it because you're so terrified of losing me that you'd rather watch me break." "Amy, I'm not finished." My voice cracked. I let it crack. "I have survived alone since I was 19 years old. I have slept on frozen ground and eaten from garbage and fought wolves twice my size and never once broken. But this," I pressed my fist against my sternum, "this is breaking me. Not the chains, not the floor. You're wanting and you're withholding, and the way you look at me when no one's watching like I'm the only real thing in the world and then pretend that I'm nothing." Silence. His hands were in his lap. His knuckles were white. His jaw was locked so tight I could see the tendons straining. "So decide," I said. "Not tomorrow, not when the war is over, not when it's safe. Now. Either claim me or let me go, but this," I gestured at the space between us, "this middle ground is killing us both, and I refuse to die slowly at your feet while you tell yourself it's protection." He stared at me. Through the bond, I felt something I'd never felt from him before. Not rage, not shame, not desire, fear. Pure, uncut terror. The terror of a man who'd just been told the truth by the only person brave enough to say it, and who understood, for the first time, that his control wasn't saving anyone. It was the weapon. It had always been the weapon. "I can't—" His voice broke. He swallowed. Tried again. "I can't claim you, not yet. The reasons haven't changed. Veil in the threat, and stop coming to me in the dark." He flinched, actually flinched, as if I'd hit him. "Stop sitting beside the throne at midnight. Stop checking on me through the bond when you think I'm asleep. Stop looking at me when no one sees." I held his gaze. My eyes were burning. "If you're going to deny me, then deny me. All the way. Don't leave me these scraps and call them nothing." The silence lasted so long I could count his heartbeats through the bond. Then, very quietly, I can't do that either. I know. My voice was barely a whisper. That's the whole problem. He reached across the space between us and pressed his shoulder against mine. Deliberately. The first voluntary contact since the almost claim. The simplest kind of touch. The kind that said I'm here without saying anything else, and something else. His hand found mine on the stone floor, not a grip. He placed his hand on top of mine and let it rest there. His palm was warm, his fingers curled slightly around the edge of my hand. Through the bond, the warmth poured in, not desire, not the sharp and desperate kind, the quiet kind, the kind that said, I heard you. I don't have an answer, but I'm not walking away. I should have pulled my hand back. I just told him he couldn't have both. I didn't pull back. We sat like that until the first gray light crept through the slits near the ceiling. His shoulder against mine. His hand on mine. Two people in the wreckage of something neither of them knew how to fix, holding on to the only true thing they had. He left without a word, but the blackberries were back with my morning meal, and beside them, a square of honeycomb wrapped in cloth, something new, something that said, I can't do what you asked. But I heard every word. The 6th morning, I'd had enough. The court was in session. Theron was presenting a territorial dispute, the Havenwood pack claiming control over a border they hadn't held in over a year. Every word of his intelligence was wrong. I stood. The chain clinked, drawing the attention of the nearest guards. The pack claiming that territory is lying. Silence. Every head turned. Theron stopped mid-sentence. The advisors stared. On the throne, the Alpha King went very still. I'm sorry, who is speaking? An advisor near the front, older, heavy-set, his lip curled with open contempt. The Havenwood pack doesn't control that border anymore. I kept my voice even. My hands were steady. The rest of me wasn't, but my hands were. They lost it 18 months ago to a smaller group that operates without formal registration. Your intelligence is based on territorial claims that haven't been accurate in over a year. The heavy-set advisor turned red. You're a rogue. You have no voice in this. She has the only voice in this room that's been to those borders. Theron's voice, sharp, cutting through the bluster. He was looking at me with surprise and respect. Continue. I did. I explained the actual territorial layout, the pack movements, the underground trade routes, information I'd gathered in 6 years of surviving in the margins. Things no scout could know because scouts came and went, but I had lived there. I was defending his kingdom, standing in chains at his feet, publicly denied, invisible to his court, and I was defending his kingdom. The room listened. When I finished, the silence was heavy. Verify it, the Alpha King said. His voice betrayed nothing. Not a glance in my direction. Send scouts. If her intelligence matches ground truth, we adjust the mapping. No acknowledgement, no praise, but through the bond, I caught it, involuntary, a pulse of something so fierce it took my breath away. Pride, the devastating, disabling pride of a man watching the woman he tried to make invisible become the most important voice in the room. He crushed it immediately, but I'd felt it. That was enough. That night he entered through the front of the hall, the way he entered in daylight as king. He walked up the center aisle, climbed the platform, and sat down. On the floor, beside me, close, closer than he'd ever been when sitting, his shoulder almost touching mine. The heat from his body bled through the space between us, and the bond sang. Your intelligence was accurate, he said. The scouts confirmed it within hours. I know. Silence. Then quiet enough that it might have been a breath. I'm sorry about what happened, the collapse. I did that. Yes, it won't happen again. You can't promise that unless you stop fighting the bond. He was quiet for a long time. Then his shoulder pressed against mine, deliberate, warm. I'm trying, he said. I'm trying to find a way that doesn't end with you in a cage or a coffin. There's a third option. I know. I'm not ready for it yet. His voice dropped. But I'm closer than I was. I leaned my head back against the throne. The bond hummed between us, warm, aching, full. "That's enough for now," I said. His shoulder pressed harder against mine. Not enough, but something. Arlo. He came to the hall in the middle of the night, not to the platform, to the base of the step.
I didn't sleep. Not a new development. I hadn't slept properly in 4 years. But this was different. This was the kind of sleeplessness that had a name. A face. A voice that said Arlo in the dark and made my wolf slam against its cage so hard I could taste blood. I sat at my desk, surrounded by intelligence reports, and stared at the page in front of me without reading it. She'd collapsed in front of the entire court. Because of me. And then she'd looked me in the eyes and said the truest thing anyone had ever said to me. You don't get to want me and deny me at the same time. My hand clenched around the edge of the desk. I'd pulled her file the day she arrived. Standard procedure. Every prisoner documented. Origin, history, threat level. Hers was thin, packless female, Silver Ridge origin, cast out at 19, no formal threat designation. But I'd told Theron to go deeper. And what he'd found was wrong. Not factually wrong. Structurally wrong. Her exile didn't make sense. Her mother's execution, the supposed conspiracy with a rival pack, had never been substantiated. No evidence, no trial. Just an accusation from the Silver Ridge Alpha, followed by immediate execution and exile of the family. Except the timing. The Silver Ridge Alpha who'd ordered the exile had died 6 months later, not in a challenge, but in a suspicious accident. The pack had been absorbed by a larger territory, and the wolf who'd orchestrated that absorption had used information about their internal politics that he shouldn't have had. Information that could only have come from someone inside Silver Ridge. The accusation against Amy's mother hadn't been paranoia. It had been manufactured. Someone had wanted the family destroyed, specifically targeted, and had used the Alpha's paranoia as a weapon, and the pack that had ultimately benefited from the fallout. Valen. I stared at the report. My blood ran cold. If Amy's exile had been engineered by the Valen Alliance, even indirectly, then her entire life had been shaped by the enemy. Her packless years, her survival in the margins, her presence on the borders where Valen was now destabilizing territory, all of it connected. Not because she was an agent. I'd staked my throne on her loyalty, and the realization that I would, that I'd risk everything on my certainty of a woman I'd known for fragments of time, told me exactly how far gone I was. But because Raylan might already know who she was, and if he knew she was my mate, I stood. The chair scraped against stone. I had to tell her. But underneath the strategic urgency, something else drove me, something I wouldn't have admitted under interrogation. I wanted to give her the truth because she deserved it, because she'd spent her entire adult life carrying grief she thought was meaningless, because the woman chained to my throne, the woman I denied every morning and craved every night, had been hurt by the same enemy I was fighting, because I was in love with her. The thought didn't surprise me. I'd known for days, maybe since the trading post, maybe since she'd pushed bread across a table toward a man everyone else was afraid to look at and changed the axis of his entire life. I was in love with her, and I was going to ruin us both.
He came to the hall in the middle of the night, not to the platform, to the base of the steps. He stood there looking up at me with an expression I hadn't seen before. Not controlled, not strategic, grim. "I need to tell you something," he said, "and it will change what you think about your past." I sat up straighter. The chain clinked, he told me. Everything. The file, Theron's research, the manufactured accusation, the engineered exile, the connection to Valen. He laid it out with the precision of a military briefing, each fact building on the last. When he finished, my hands were in my lap. My knuckles were white. My mother's face. The last time I saw her, standing in the doorway of our den, her hand on my brother's shoulder, telling me to run, her voice steady, her eyes not. My father's voice breaking on the pack link, telling me not to come back, telling me he loved me, the link going dead. The night I ran through the Greymarch, bleeding and alone, and the silence after, the silence that lasted 6 years and never stopped being loud. All of it. Not random, not bad luck. Architecture. My mother wasn't conspiring with anyone, I said. My voice was steady. I was proud of that. No, she was killed because someone needed a reason to destroy our pack. That's what the evidence suggests. And my father and my brother. I can't confirm what happened to your brother, but yes, the Valen connection is strong. I closed my eyes. The pressure behind them was enormous. Something cracked, not the way Arlo cracked, in fissures, controlled, barely visible. I cracked the way a dam cracks, all at once. Everything I'd held together for 6 years, every night I'd slept on cold ground and told myself it was fine, every meal I'd missed and called it manageable, every morning I'd woken up alone and decided to keep going because what else was there? All of it gave way at once. The first stab hit me like a fist. I pressed my hand over my mouth, tried to hold it in. My shoulders shook, my eyes burned. The chain rattled because my whole body was trembling and I couldn't stop it, couldn't control it, couldn't perform strength for one more second because the truth had just ripped the floor out from under me and I was falling. My mother hadn't betrayed anyone. My father hadn't failed. My family hadn't been destroyed by bad luck or paranoia. They'd been murdered. Deliberately. Strategically. By people who'd then watched me wander through the wreckage of my own life for 6 years like a ghost. And I hadn't broken. I hadn't died. I'd survived. But surviving had cost me everything, and now I was learning that the cost had never been necessary. I pressed my forehead against my knees and cried. Not quietly. Not gracefully. The kind of crying that comes from a place so deep it doesn't care about dignity. The ugly, racking, gasping kind that tears through you like weather. 6 years of grief, restructured around a new axis, pouring out of me on the floor of a throne room at midnight. He didn't speak, but I heard him move, heard the soft sound of his knees hitting stone, and then his hand was on my back, warm, steady, pressing between my shoulder blades with a gentleness that almost broke me worse. Not pulling me toward him, not trying to fix it, just there. A warm, solid presence that said I'm not leaving without using a single word. I cried until my ribs ached, until my throat was raw, until the sobs wound down into shaking breaths and the shaking breaths wound down into silence. His hand stayed. When I finally lifted my head, my face was a disaster. Swollen, wet, blotchy. I looked at him and waited for the flinch, the discomfort, the pity, the pulling back. His eyes were red, not crying, but close. The alpha king of the northern territories, the wolf who'd built an empire on the principle of never showing weakness, sitting on a cold floor with red eyes because the woman he'd denied had finally broken, and her pain had bled through the bond and wrecked him. If Raylan knows who I am, I started, because if I didn't redirect this, I was going to fall apart again. Then he knew before he walked into this hall, and his interest in you isn't curiosity, it's confirmation. He's been watching me. He's been watching everything. But you, specifically, might be the piece that connects his operation to a decade of territorial manipulation. I looked at him. You're saying I'm not just your vulnerability. I'm theirs. I'm saying you might be the only person who can prove what they've been doing, which makes you more dangerous to them than I am. The implications settled through me like cold water. I wasn't just a mate to be hidden. I was evidence. My history, my exile, my years in the borderlands, all of it was a map of Valen's operations, written in the trajectory of my life. I need these chains off. My voice was hard now. I need access to your intelligence network, and I need to tell you everything I saw in 6 years of living in the places your scouts can't reach. He looked at me for a long time. Through the bond, I felt the calculation, the king assessing, measuring, weighing, and beneath it, pride. Raw, startled pride in the woman sitting at his feet, and responding to the worst revelation of her life with strategy instead of collapse. Tomorrow, he said, the chains come off. I'll speak with Theron. And the court, you'll be given a role, territorial consultant, your knowledge legitimized. And the real reason? The real reason is that you're the most valuable intelligence asset I have, and I've been keeping you on a floor." He paused. Something shifted in his expression, the mask cracking. "And because you deserve better than this. You've always deserved better than this." I held his gaze. His hand was still on my back. Neither of us had mentioned it. "Better starts with the chains," I said. "I know." He left, and for the first time since I'd been dragged into his court, the darkness felt less like a prison and more like the space before a dawn. The chains came off on a gray morning. Theron crouched in front of me with the iron key. "Territorial consultant. You attend court. You advise on borderland conditions. A guard is assigned for protection. Not containment? Not containment." He unlocked the cuffs. The iron fell away. I stared at my bare wrists, raw, bruised, ringed with the ghost of metal, deep grooves worn into the skin, the worst of it still weeping where the iron had cut through. 12 days of damage, catalogued only by me. Something rushed through me that was larger than relief. Not freedom, not quite. More like possibility, the feeling of a door opening after you've forgotten that doors exist. I had a room now, small, real, a bed with sheets, a table, a window overlooking the inner courtyard. After 12 days on stone, the mattress felt obscene. I sat on the edge and pressed my palms flat against the sheets and breathed. I wanted to cry. My body wanted to, the kind of crying that comes when danger passes and the body finally processes what it endured. But I had already broken once in front of him, the night he'd told me about my family. I wasn't sure I could afford to break again. I washed my wrists carefully, applied the salve that had been left on the table, wrapped the worst of them with strips of cloth. Sarah, the guard from the washroom, was assigned as my permanent escort. Compact, dark-haired, expression that could cut glass. "I'm not your babysitter," she said. "You go where I go. If you run, I stop you. If someone comes for you, I stop them. That's two things. That's two things." Walking into the throne room unchained was vertigo. Same hall, same pillars, same crowd. But I entered through the main doors, on my feet, in clothes that fit, dark gray, clean, the tunic cinched at the waist with a leather belt. My hair was washed and pulled back. My wrists were wrapped but visible. The bolt at the base of the throne, where my chain had been, sat empty, visible. The court stared. I kept my chin up. He was already seated, and the moment I crossed the threshold, his entire body went rigid. Not the small, controlled reactions I'd grown accustomed to. Not the fractional hitches and suppressed pulses. This was different. This was total. Every muscle in his body locked at once, and through the bond I felt his wolf slam forward with a force that would have brought a lesser man to his knees. I was walking toward him, upright, unchained, in his colors, and his wolf, starved for weeks, caged and denied and beaten back, saw its mate walking free and lost its mind. He stood up. The entire court went silent. Advisors froze mid-conversation. Warriors straightened. Because the Alpha King did not stand during a session. The Alpha King sat and the world arranged itself around him. He did not stand unless something was very wrong or someone was about to die. He descended one step, then another. His eyes were locked on me, not the controlled gaze of a king. Wide, unguarded, silver bleeding into the gray of his irises. His wolf was at the surface, and the man behind it was too stunned to cage it. I stopped walking. The hall held its breath. He crossed the platform, descended the last step, and walked down the center aisle toward me with a stride that had nothing of a king in it and everything of a wolf, closing the distance to something it would kill to protect. He stopped in front of me. Close. Too close for a throne room. Close enough that I could feel the heat pouring off his body, close enough that his scent hit me and the bond surged so hard my fingers curled at my sides. His hand came up. Not slowly, not with hesitation. His hand came up and cupped the side of my face. In front of everyone. 200 wolves watching. His thumb traced across my cheekbone. firm, deliberate, possessive, and his eyes moved over my face with an intensity that bordered on pain. Reading me, checking, confirming I was real and here and his. His fingers slid into the hair behind my ear, tightened. The hall was so quiet I could hear the torches burning. Through the bond, everything. Every wall gone. No cage, no mask, no control. Just his wolf pressing against mine with the desperate, keening urgency of an animal that had been separated from its mate too long. And behind it, the man, stunned by his own hand on my face, horrified by the exposure, unable to make himself pull away. His thumb traced my cheekbone one more time. Slower, like he was memorizing the shape of it. Then the awareness hit him. I watched it happen. The exact second the king caught up with the wolf, his eyes shifted, widened. He registered the hall, the audience, his hand on my face, the fact that he'd just crossed a throne room and touched the woman he'd publicly denied with 200 witnesses. His hand dropped. The mask slammed back into place, but too late, way too late. The damage was done. I could see it in the advisors' faces, in the way Theron closed his eyes, in the way the warriors exchanged glances that said, "We all just saw that." "Your position is at the advisory table," he said. His voice was flat, controlled, but his hand, the one that had just been on my face, was curled into a fist at his side, trembling. "Theron will brief you." He turned and walked back to the throne. Sat. The iron groaned. He didn't look at me again for the rest of the session. But through the bond, I felt the aftershock. Not regret, something more complicated. The shattering awareness that his control had failed, completely and publicly, and the dark, terrified, exhilarating undercurrent beneath it, and it felt like relief. The first days established my position. I attended sessions, listened, learned the rhythms of his court. I briefed scouts. I provided intelligence that his formal network couldn't match. And slowly, carefully, I began to matter. Each time I spoke, I felt the room recalibrate, not accepting me, not yet, but acknowledging that the rogue who'd been chained to the throne knew things they didn't. Through the bond, I felt something from him that I could only describe as hunger, not physical. The hunger of a man watching the woman he'd denied becoming someone his kingdom couldn't afford to lose. On the third evening after my release, he came to my room, earlier than usual, not yet dark. He filled the doorway, shoulders spanning the frame, hands at his sides, cataloging the small space with his eyes. His gaze caught on the bed, held for a fraction of a second. Through the bond, a flash of something hot and involuntary that he killed before it fully formed. Then his eyes dropped to my wrists, the wrappings. He went still. A different kind of still from the throne room stillness. The stillness of a man who has just seen something that changes the internal math. "How long?" he said. "Since the first day." "You didn't..." He stopped. 12 days. It's healing." He crossed the room in 2 strides. "Show me. It's fine. Show me." I held out my wrist. He took it, gently, so gently it made something crack in my chest, and began unwrapping the cloth, slowly, layer by layer. His fingers worked with a care that shouldn't have been possible for hands that large, hands I'd watched crack iron. The last layer stuck. Dried blood had fused the cloth to the wound. He stopped. "This will hurt," he said. "I know." He peeled it free. I didn't flinch, but my jaw tightened, and through the bond he felt everything I didn't show. He looked at the wound, both wrists exposed now, raw, weeping, the skin abraded to the layer where you could see the pink of underlying tissue. 12 days of iron, 12 days of hiding it, 12 days of blood drying and reopening and drying again. A sound came out of him, low, not a growl, not a word, a sound of pure, undiluted anguish. "I did this," he said. "The chains did this. I ordered the chains." His thumb traced the edge of the wound, so light it was barely contact, but the bond magnified everything. The touch sent warmth flooding up my arm, and I watched his hand tremble against my skin. Through the bond, fury, not at me, at himself. A black, consuming self-hatred for the chains, for the days, for the wounds he'd inflicted, and the fact that she'd hidden them rather than show weakness in his court. I would have hidden them too. I said, don't make this easier for me. He reached for the salve on the table, sat in the chair, pulled it close enough that my wrist rested in his lap. And then the Alpha King of the Northern Territories, the man who'd built his reign on never showing tenderness, began dressing my wounds. He worked in silence. His hands were steady, but the effort it took to keep them that way was visible in his jaw, in the cords of his neck. He cleaned the wound, applied the salve with his thumb, smoothing it in small, careful circles. The intimacy of it was devastating. His head bent over my wrist, his breath warm against my skin, his touch so gentle it contradicted everything I'd seen him be. I watched his face. The mask was gone. Not cracked, not fissured, gone. What was underneath was just a man, tired, guilty, concentrating on not hurting the one person he'd already hurt too much. His thumb paused over my pulse, pressed, held. Neither of us spoke. The room contracted around the silence, just the sound of his breathing, slow and careful, and the faint, wet sound of salve against skin. His thumb rested on my pulse for 3 heartbeats, 4, 5. I could feel his breath warm against the inside of my wrist, could see the way his lashes cast shadows on his cheekbones in the fading light. "Your heart beats fast," he murmured. "Your hand is on my wrist." His eyes lifted, met mine. The distance between us was nothing, inches, and the bond sang with the proximity. I could see the ring of silver around his irises, could feel his breath, could see the exact moment his gaze dropped to my mouth and came back up. His throat worked. His hand tightened fractionally on my wrist. He looked away first, went back to rapping. His voice was rough when he spoke. "I don't know how to do this. The version of me that sits in rooms and talks. I know how to be a king. I know how to be a weapon. Not this. You're doing fine." I am rigid with anxiety. I laughed. The sound surprised me, rusty, unused, startled out of me before I could catch it. His eyes widened. Something moved across his face that I'd never seen. Warmth, open, uncomplicated warmth. And through the bond, wonder. Like the sound of my laughter was something rare he wanted to keep. "I like that sound," he said, almost to himself. My laugh died, not because it wasn't genuine, but because the way he looked at me, with open, unguarded warmth, cracked something I'd been holding together with willpower. He finished rapping, set my wrist down, didn't let go. "There's something you should know," I said, "before the Greymarch mission, before any of this goes further." He waited. "I sat at that table 5 years ago knowing what it might cost me. Not because I was reckless, because when I looked at you, I didn't see what everyone else saw. I didn't see a monster, or a weapon, or a threat. I held his gaze. I saw someone who'd been alone so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen." His jaw tightened, his hands curled into fists. "And I chose to see you anyway. I chose you, Arlo, 5 years ago, and I'd choose you again." Something cracked behind his eyes. Not broke, cracked, a fissure letting light through. "You lost everything because of that choice," he said. His voice was barely held together. "I lost everything I could lose. But what I did, sitting with you when no one else would, that's the only thing I've done in my life that I'm proud of." He stared at me. The bond pulsed. Slow, deep, like a heartbeat learning a new rhythm. He reached across the space and took my hand, held it, not a grip, a hold, gentle, deliberate. His thumb traced across my knuckles, each pass sending warmth up my arm and into my chest. The bond opened between us, not the violent detonation of before, but something softer. A door left ajar. "When this is over," he said, "I'm going to earn the right to be the man you saw at that table. You already are. Not yet." His eyes were steady. "But I will be. He released my hand and stood. At the door, his fingers tightened on the frame, the briefest hesitation, the war between leaving and staying playing out in the tendons of his hand. The Greymarch mission, be careful. I will, be careful. And the second time carried a weight the first didn't, not an instruction but a prayer. A man standing in a doorway telling a woman to come back to him without being able to say the words. The door closed. I pressed my hand flat against the mattress where his warmth still lingered and breathed. The Greymarch was a 3-day ride. I traveled with Sarah, 2 scouts, and a small military escort. Arlo had wanted more, a full squadron, a perimeter team, aerial scouts. His voice had been calm when he made the case. His wolf had not been calm. Through the bond, the animal paced, frantic, wild, screaming, "Don't let her leave." I'd insisted a large force would spook the packless communities. The argument had been brief. He'd looked at me with an expression that said every instinct he possessed was screaming against this. I'd looked back with an expression that said I was going regardless. He let me go. But when I passed through the castle gate, the bond stretched between us like a wire being pulled taut, and through it, a pulse so raw and unguarded it nearly stopped me. Come back to me. Not in words, in feeling. In the language the bond spoke when the man was too proud to say what his wolf was screaming. I kept walking. By the second day, the connection was thin, still present, still warm, but attenuated by miles, a thread instead of a rope, and the thinning hurt, not emotionally, physically, the same bone-deep ache from before, settling into my chest like a cold I couldn't shake. My hands trembled at odd moments. My sleep fractured into restless, sweat-soaked fragments. I found myself reaching for the bond constantly, during lulls in the ride while setting up camp in the quiet minutes before sleep, pressing against it the way you press your tongue against a loose tooth. I missed him. The realization hit me in the gut, sudden and annoying and undeniable. I missed the weight of his presence, the way the air changed when he was near, the low rumble of his voice, the heat of his shoulder against mine. I missed a man who'd chained me to a floor for 12 days. I pushed it down and focused on the mission. Mora was waiting at the edge of the packless settlement, an elderly female wolf, walking stick in hand. "I heard you'd been taken," Mora said. "I was. I'm here now." Mora's gaze swept the escort, the Ashenmore insignia, Sarah's military stance. "You come wearing a king's colors. I come with a real offer, protection, territory, recognition. In exchange for information. Everything you know about the Valen operation." Mora's eyes sharpened. "So you know about that. I know they destroyed my family. I know they've been using the Packless as infrastructure for years. And I know they're about to move. In exchange for information. Everything you know about the Valen." Mora was quiet for a long time. Then, "Come with me." The settlement was larger than I remembered. Nearly 300 wolves. Families, children, living in the gaps no one claimed because no one cared. I knew these people. I'd been one of them. And now I was standing in their camp, wearing the colors of a king who'd never once looked at the margins of his own kingdom. The intelligence Mora provided was staggering. Supply caches, communication networks, weapon stockpiles in abandoned mines, and a timeline. Weeks, Mora said. Maybe less. I sent 2 scouts ahead with the initial intelligence, stayed another day to formalize arrangements, making promises I intended to keep because these people had kept me alive when no one else would. Then I broke camp and moved fast. We were 90 minutes from the castle walls when it happened. The attack came from 3 sides, not bandits, organized. 10 wolves in shifted form, silent, hitting the escort's flanks in perfect coordination. Valen trained. Sarah shifted mid-stride and threw herself at the nearest attacker. The escort responded. Wolves against wolves, the sounds of combat splitting the forest's silence. But the attackers weren't targeting the escort, they were targeting me. 3 broke through the line, fast, trained. Eyes locked on me. I shifted, silver gray, lean, built for speed. I dodged the first, felt teeth graze my flank, a line of fire along my ribs. I spun, snapped at the second, caught skin. The third hit me from behind. I went down hard, teeth at the back of my neck, the dominant hold, submit or die. I thrashed, snarled, but the wolf was twice my weight. The jaws tightened. I felt the pressure on my spine. Then a sound split the air. Not from the forest, from inside my chest, through the bond. A roar. Not something I heard with my ears. Something I felt. Seismic, tectonic. The bond, attenuated by distance to a thin thread, suddenly blazed white hot. The thread became a rope, became a chain, became a flood. I felt him, not close, not in the forest, but coming. Covering ground at impossible speed. His wolf fully emerged, the man submerged, and the creature racing through the dark was not a king or a politician or a strategist. It was something ancient and furious and absolutely certain of one thing. Someone had touched what was his. Through the bond, I felt his mind, not thoughts. He was beyond thoughts. Pure animal, pure terror. The terror of a male wolf whose mate is hurt and miles away and he can't get there fast enough. Sarah tore the wolf off my neck. Run! I ran, bleeding, panting, my wolf's legs eating ground. The castle walls rose through the trees. I hit the gate in wolf form and shifted back, stumbling to my knees, blood soaking through my shirt. Get the king, I gasped. I didn't need to. He was already there. A crash of doors, thunder of footsteps, the sound of a castle rearranging itself around a force of nature. He burst from the main hall at a dead run, something the court had never seen, something that broke every rule he'd set for himself, and stopped when he saw me. On my knees, blood on my side, shaking, his face cracked. Not the small fissures I'd been tracking for weeks, a full, devastating fracture, eyebrows pulling together, jaw unlocking, eyes blowing wide with something that looked like agony. His wolf was so close to the surface I could see it in the silver ring around his irises. The low, continuous growl from his chest was not anger. It was terror. He crossed the distance, dropped to his knees in front of me, in the open, in front of guards and servants and whoever else was watching. The Alpha King, on his knees, in front of the woman he'd publicly denied. His hands found my face. Both hands. Cupping my jaw, tilting my head, scanning for damage with the desperation of a man who wasn't sure I was real. His palms were warm and shaking. "You're bleeding," he said. His voice. Shattered glass, no composure left. "It's shallow. You're bleeding." His thumb traced my cheekbone, his hands shook. "They touched you. They put their teeth." His voice broke. Actually broke. The Alpha King's voice cracking in a courtyard full of witnesses, his hands trembling against the face of a woman he'd chained to a floor 2 weeks ago. I lifted my hands, shaking, blood-stained, and pressed them against his chest, over his heart. The bond detonated on contact, flooding us both with the full, staggering wave of what we'd felt across the distance. His terror, my pain, his fury, my relief, all of it crashing together. "I'm here," I said. "I'm alive." He pressed his forehead against mine, eyes closed, breathing ragged, his hands still on my face, my hands still on his chest. Through the bond, the full, staggering weight of what he'd experienced, the moment the bond had screamed, the moment his wolf had seized control, the minutes of running without knowing if he'd find me alive. Terror. The absolute annihilating terror of a man who had just discovered that his worst fear wasn't losing his kingdom. It was losing me. "This is why," he said. "Raw, broken. This is what happens. And I'm here, I came back. Amy, I will always come back." He opened his eyes, pale gray, wet. Around us, the courtyard had gone still. Guards, servants, stable hands, all of them watching the Alpha King hold the face of his territorial consultant like she was the only real thing in the world. The secret was unraveling. I didn't care. Neither did he. He took me to his quarters. Not the throne room. Not the war room, his private space, a guarded suite no one entered without permission. He closed the door, and the moment it shut, the last of his control broke. Not violently, completely. His hands were on me, my arms, my face, my ribs where the blood was soaking through, checking, cataloging, making sure I was whole. His movements were urgent but careful, the hands of a man terrified of what he'd find, and terrified of hurting me while looking. "Let me see the wound," he said. I lifted my shirt. The gash along my ribs was long but shallow. Sarah's intervention had prevented the teeth from going deep. He looked at it, and a sound came from him I'd never heard before. Low, sustained, anguished. Not a growl, a keen, the sound of a wolf in pain. He pressed his palm against the wound, not to heal it, just to touch it, to feel the evidence. His hand was warm against my skin, and the bond between us pulsed with something enormous. Through it, I should have been there. I should have protected you. I will never let you out of my sight again. And beneath that, not in words but in the pressure of his hand, I love you. I love you. I love you. They were Valen, I said, because if I didn't redirect this, I was going to fall apart. Trained, they came specifically from me. I know. His jaw was locked. Raylan's accelerating, the attack confirms it. The intelligence from the Greymarch supply caches, weapons, timeline. He's going to move on the eastern border within weeks. Theron's already mobilizing, your scouts got through. His hand was still on my side. Neither of us mentioned it. You saved us time we didn't know we needed. Then let me finish it. Let me work with Theron. Let me use the Packless network. We can map the entire Valen operation. You were almost killed tonight. And I'm still here, still standing, still telling you what needs to happen next. I held his gaze. Stop trying to protect me from this. He stared at me. Through the bond, I felt the calculation, and beneath it, the last wall starting to crumble. Sit down, he said. Let me clean the wound properly before you plan a war. I sat on the edge of his bed. He pulled a chair close enough that his knees bracketed mine, and reached for the basin of water on the side table. He wrung out a cloth. His movements were precise, but his hands, the hands that ruled a kingdom, hadn't stopped trembling since the courtyard. He pressed the cloth to my ribs. I hissed. My hand shot out and gripped his forearm. Reflex, not intention. And my fingers dug into the hard muscle of his arm. He froze, not the controlled freeze of a man managing his reactions. A total freeze. His hand stopped on my ribs. His breathing stopped. His entire body went rigid, and through the bond I felt the contact, my hand on his bare forearm, my fingers against his skin, the bond drinking it in like water in a desert, the warmth flooding both of us so fast and so completely that for a moment neither of us could move. Sorry, I said. I started to pull my hand back. His free hand covered mine, pressed it against his arm, held it there. Don't, he said. Quiet, almost inaudible. We stayed like that. His hand on my ribs with the cloth, my hand on his arm, his hand holding mine in place, 3 points of contact and the bond humming through all of them, warm, insistent, greedy. Feeding off every touch, he went back to cleaning the wound, but he didn't move my hand, and I didn't move it either. The room was quiet, just the sound of water in the basin. His breathing slow and deliberate, mine not quite steady. The soft sound of the cloth against my skin. He finished cleaning and reached for a bandage. This required him to lean closer, his head at the level of my shoulder, his breath warm against my collarbone as he wrapped the cloth around my ribs. I could see the details I'd never been close enough to see. The small scar along his jawline, the way his dark hair fell forward when he bent his head, the thick line of his lashes. He tied the bandage, didn't pull back. His head was still bent, his face inches from the curve of my neck. I could feel his breath, warm, unsteady, moving across my skin in slow, deliberate waves. Each exhale ghosted over the pulse point where his teeth had almost marked me weeks ago, and my whole body tightened. Through the bond, a struggle so violent I could feel it in my own chest. his wolf pressing forward, his mind holding it back. The two forces locked against each other while his mouth hovered close enough to my neck that I could feel the heat of his lips without contact. He breathed in, slow, deep, drawing my scent into his lungs. His hand, the one that had been holding the bandage, came to rest on my knee, just resting, the weight of it warm through the fabric. His thumb moved once, a single involuntary stroke along the inside of my knee. My breath caught. His thumb stopped, his hand tightened. We didn't move, didn't speak. The silence was so dense it had texture. I could feel it pressing against my skin, heavy and warm and charged, his breath on my neck, his hand on my knee, my hand still on his arm. The bond between us thrumming so loud I was sure he could hear it. His lips parted. I felt the slight change in his breathing, the shift from controlled to something more ragged. His mouth was close enough to my throat that if I turned my head even slightly, my jaw would brush his hair. I turned my head. My jaw grazed his temple. He inhaled sharply, a sound like he'd been cut, and his hand on my knee tightened hard enough that I felt each finger. Neither of us moved. His forehead dropped to my shoulder, just resting there. The weight of him, the weight of everything he was carrying, pressing against me in a gesture so simple and so vulnerable it nearly undid me. Amy, my name against my skin, barely a whisper, the vibration of it traveling through my collarbone and into my chest. I know, I said, I know. If I start. He lifted his head. His face was inches from mine. I could see every detail, the pale gray of his irises, the silver ring where his wolf pressed close, the way his gaze moved from my eyes to my mouth and stayed there. The muscle in his jaw ticked. Once, twice. The space between us was nothing. A held breath, a heartbeat. I could feel the heat of his mouth, could see the moment his resolve wavered, the way his head tilted fractionally, closing the distance by a centimeter. Then another, his nose brushed mine, the lightest contact. And the bond howled, not with pain, with proximity, with the torturous, exquisite almostness of a kiss that hadn't happened yet. I felt his lower lip graze mine. Not a kiss, the ghost of one, a tremor of contact so light it was barely real. But it sent a shockwave through the bond that made us both gasp. He pulled back, an inch. His eyes were wild, the silver almost overtaking the gray. "Tell me to stop," he said. His voice didn't sound like him. It sounded like something that had been scraped raw. I looked at him, this man, this impossible, terrified, devastating man who had denied me and protected me and almost destroyed me and couldn't stay away. "Claim me," I said. The words landed between us like a blade. The war, claim me, not because it's safe, not because the timing is right, because every night we spend pretending this isn't real is a night we don't get back. My voice cracked. I let it. I have spent 6 years surviving alone, and I am so tired of being the strong one, Arlo. I am so tired of being the woman who endures. I lifted my hand and pressed it against his jaw. His eyes closed at the contact. His whole body shuddered. One full tremor from his chest through his shoulders, the shudder of a man who'd been bracing against something for so long that the slightest kindness shattered him. "Let me be the woman who is chosen." The silence lasted 3 heartbeats, each one a lifetime. I saw the exact moment it happened, the moment the man who'd controlled everything for 4 years decided to stop. His eyes changed, not the color, not the intensity, but the quality. The resistance drained out of them. The cage opened. And what rushed forward was not the controlled king or the strategic mind. It was the wolf and the man, together, for the first time, pointing at the same thing. He didn't close the distance. He erased it. One hand slid to the back of my neck. The other gripped my waist. He pulled me against him, not gently, not carefully, with the overwhelming desperation of a man who had been holding his breath for weeks and was finally allowed to breathe. His mouth found mine. The kiss was not gentle. It was a drowning man breaking the surface. Desperate, consuming, with the overwhelming relief of finally giving in. His hand in my hair, gripping, tilting my head back. His other arm locked around my waist, lifting me against him until there was no space left. His chest against mine, his heartbeat slamming through both of us, the bond between us igniting like a fuse. He kissed me the way a starving man eats, with his whole body, with everything, with the accumulated weight of every night he'd stood in doorways and walked away. His mouth was hot and demanding and shaking. Shaking. Because the man who controlled a kingdom couldn't control the tremor in his hands when he kissed me. I gripped the front of his shirt and held on. Held on the way I'd held on to everything, with both hands, with my whole body, with the reckless certainty that this was worth any cost. He pulled back a fraction, forehead against mine, breathing ragged, his hand still in my hair, still gripping, like letting go wasn't an option his body was willing to consider. "Tell me to stop," he said. His voice was wrecked. "Tell me to stop and I will. Don't you dare." He made a sound, half laugh, half groan, and kissed me again. Slower this time, deep, with the patience of a man who had just realized he wasn't stealing something, he was being given it. His mouth moved along my jaw, down my neck. His teeth grazed the spot, the place where the mark would go, and my whole body arched against him, my wolf keening, my hands fisting in his shirt. He paused there, his lips against my pulse, his breath coming in short, harsh waves. Through the bond I felt the war, the final war, the last one, the wolf straining forward with every fiber of its being and the man holding it back by a thread that was fraying second by second. "Here?" he murmured against my skin. Yes. He didn't move. His mouth hovered over the spot and I could feel his canines, extended now, the tips pressing feather-light against my pulse. Not biting, holding. The unbearable, excruciating pause of a man who understood that the next second would change everything. Through the bond, a torrent. His fear, his desire, his grief for every day he'd wasted. His certainty, absolute, bone-deep, terrified, that this woman was his and had always been his and would always be his, and that the only thing worse than the risk of claiming her was the certainty of losing her if he didn't. His teeth pressed harder. I felt the points against my skin, not yet breaking through. Hovering at the threshold, my hand found the back of his head, fingers sliding into his hair. I pressed him closer, not forcing, choosing, telling him without words, "I'm not afraid, I want this, I want you, all of you, the king and the wolf and the man who ate bread from a stranger's hand because she was the only person who'd ever offered him something freely." He made a sound against my throat, a sound that was barely human, a sound torn from the deepest part of him, and his teeth broke skin. The bond ignited, not one-sided anymore, the full bond, both sides. A connection so deep and total it rewrote the world. I felt his heartbeat in my chest, not through the bond, in me. Felt his wolf surge forward to meet mine, the two animals slamming together with a force that was not violence but recognition. Two halves of something that had always been whole, finding each other across years and distance and denial. The bond completed with a sound I felt rather than heard. A click, like a key turning in a lock, like the universe settling a debt. The rush of it staggered us both. He gripped me harder. I gripped him harder. The world tilted, righted itself, and settled into a new configuration. One where I could feel him, all of him. Not through a wall, not through a cage. The full, staggering totality of Arlo. His fear and his strength and his devotion and the quiet, fierce tenderness he'd buried so deep even he'd forgotten it existed. And he could feel me, my stubbornness, my grief, my loyalty, the reckless, self-destructive love that had made me sit at a table with a dangerous man and push bread toward him when the whole world said run. When we pulled apart, we were both breathing hard, his forehead against mine, his hand at the back of my neck where the mark now burned, warm, permanent. His. Mine, he said. Quiet. Absolute. The word his wolf had been screaming since the first moment I'd crossed his threshold. Finally spoken aloud, finally real. Yours. I pressed my hand against his chest, felt his heart hammer under my palm. And you're mine. All of you, the king and the man. His hand cupped the side of my neck. His thumb found my pulse, rested there, pressing gently, counting it, committing it to memory. The war starts now, he said, and when it does, you're beside me. Not behind me, not hidden, beside me. That's all I've ever wanted. I know. Something crossed his face. Grief and gratitude tangled together. That's what I was most afraid of. He kissed me again, and slower, with the patience of a man who had decided he had the rest of his life. I kissed him back with the ferocity of a woman who had sat at a table with a dangerous man and chosen not to leave. The same choice, the same cost, and this time it was everything. The Valen Alliance moved 3 days later. 3 Eastern packs turned simultaneously, borders breached, supply lines disrupted, communication towers taken. The attack was coordinated, surgical. Raylan had spent years positioning his pieces, and now he moved them with the precision of a man who'd expected to face a king with no vulnerabilities and no intelligence about the margins of his own kingdom. He was wrong on both counts. My packless network, Mora's people, the wolves living in the cracks, had been feeding information since the Greymarch mission. Every supply cache Raylan had hidden I'd mapped, every communication route I knew, every weapons stockpile, every safe hold, every tactical position, documented, relayed to Theron, incorporated into Ashenmoor's defensive strategy. The War Council convened in the throne room, Arlo at the center, Theron at his right, and me at his left. Not behind the advisors, not at the base of the platform. Beside him, his hand brushed my lower back as I took my position. Brief, deliberate, hidden from the court by the angle of his body. But I felt it, warm, steady, possessive, and the bond purred. The court saw my position, the court understood. The Eastern offensive is a feint, I said, pointing at the map spread across the war table. Raylan wants you to commit your forces east. The real strike comes from the south. Through the mountain pass your scouts have always considered impassable. It is impassable, an advisor said. Even in summer, it's impassable for a conventional force. Not for wolves who've been living in those mountains for 2 years, stockpiling supplies, cutting hidden paths. I know because the packless community near the pass watched them do it. Silence. Through the bond I felt Arlo's focus, sharp, absolute, and beneath it pride, fierce and burning and no longer hidden. If she's right, the southern pass is the priority, Theron said. She's right, Arlo said, no hesitation. Redirect the primary force south. Hold the east with the defensive garrison. Sire, committing our main force based on the word of, the heavy-set advisor again. Based on the word of the person who has been right about every single piece of intelligence she's provided this court. Arlo's voice was quiet, deadly. Continue that sentence at your own risk. The advisor closed his mouth. The forces moved. Ashenmoor's military machine deployed south on my intelligence. Everything hinged on my knowledge, on the network I'd built, on the years of living in the margins that every wolf in this court had looked down on. The battle at the southern pass happened at dawn. I directed from the command ridge, Theron beside me, communicating with the forces below. Through the bond I felt Arlo miles away leading the front line, his wolf blazing with battle focus. The cold, precise clarity of a man built for war doing what he was built to do, and underneath it the constant awareness of me. My heartbeat, my location, pulse by pulse confirming I was alive. I was right. Raylan's southern force emerged exactly where my intelligence said they would. Instead of an undefended border, they met the full weight of the Ashenmoor military, deployed, positioned, and waiting. The battle was fierce, but short. Raylan's force designed for a surprise strike, crumbled against a defense that knew their numbers, positions, and fallback routes. By midday, the southern threat was broken. The eastern feint collapsed within hours. Raylan was captured attempting to retreat through the mountains. They brought him to the command post in chains. The spy master, who'd spent years building an operation to destroy Ashenmoor, dragged before the woman whose family he'd helped destroy a decade ago. He looked at me. The charming smile was gone, something cold and evaluating in its place. "You," he said, "the girl from Silver Ridge." "You knew," I said, not a question. "I knew your mother's death would destabilize the pack. I didn't know you'd survive." He paused. "I certainly didn't know you'd end up at his feet." "At his side," I corrected. His mouth thinned. "A mate bond. The one thing I couldn't predict." "No," I said. "A choice. He didn't claim me because fate told him to. And I didn't survive 6 years in your margins because I was lucky. I survived because the people you used as infrastructure, the wolves you displaced, threatened, exploited, chose to help me. The same way they chose to help me end this." Raylan was taken away. The war was over. And the woman who'd been dragged into a throne room in chains had just saved the kingdom that had chained her. The throne room was full. Every seat, every standing position, every inch of wall space. Word had spread through the kingdom. The Alpha King was making an announcement, something the court could feel in the air like pressure before a storm. I stood at the base of the platform, not chained, not kneeling, standing in dark blue, the color of the Ashenmoor pack, shoulders straight, chin level. My wrists were still scarred. I didn't hide them. Sarah stood behind me, expression unreadable, though something like satisfaction flickered in her eyes. Theron stood to the side, arms folded, and for the first time I saw something on his scarred face I'd never seen. A smile, small, almost hidden. But there, the hall waited. The main doors opened. The Alpha King entered. He moved differently today. The power was still there, the authority that oriented every wolf in the room like iron to a magnet. But underneath, something new, certainty. Not the cold certainty of a king making calculated moves, the warm certainty of a man who had stopped fighting himself. He climbed the platform, stood in front of the throne. He didn't sit. 2 weeks ago, he said, his voice reaching every corner of the hall, a woman was brought to this court in chains. I told you she was a rogue, a trespasser. I told you she was nothing to me. Absolute silence. I lied. The murmur that followed rippled through the crowd like wind through grass. I lied because I was afraid, because the enemies at our borders had spent years preparing to destroy us, and I believed that acknowledging the bond between us would give them the weapon they needed. He paused. Let it land. I was wrong. No murmur this time. The hall was holding its breath. The weapon that defeated our enemies was not my strength. It was not the army I built. It was not the fear I cultivated. His eyes found mine across the room. Through the bond, I felt the full force of what was behind those eyes. Every wall down, every defense gone. Nothing between us but the truth. It was the woman I chained to my throne and called a prisoner. He descended the steps, slowly, every footfall measured. The court watched, 200 wolves tracking their Alpha King as he walked the center aisle toward the woman at its end. He stopped in front of me, and then the Alpha King, the most feared wolf in the Northern Territories, the man who had built his entire reign on the principle of never showing weakness, did something no one in that room had ever imagined. He knelt, one knee in front of me, in front of everyone. The sound that went through the court was not a gasp, it was deeper, seismic, the kind of sound a room makes when something fundamental shifts. He looked up at me, pale gray eyes, open, no mask, no wall, no throne between us. "I chained you," he said. "I denied you. I called you nothing when you were everything. And you stayed. You fought for my kingdom. You saved my people with the skills I tried to make invisible." His voice held steady, but through the bond I felt the tremor, the enormous wave of everything he'd held back. I am not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to let me spend the rest of my life earning the right to stand beside you. 200 wolves, not a breath. I looked down at him, this man who had been my captor and my protector and my denial and my truth, this man who had sat at a table once, alone in a room full of wolves who feared him, and eaten bread from a stranger's hand because she was the first person in his life who'd offered him something without wanting something in return. I should have made him wait. Instead, I reached down and took his hand, because that was who I was, the woman who gave too quickly, who forgave before she was asked, who chose people the moment her heart decided, regardless of what it cost. "Get up," I said. He rose, our hands joined. His grip was firm and warm and certain. "No more chains," he said, quiet. "For me, no more shadows," I answered. He turned to face the court, my hand in his. His voice filled the hall. "She is my mate, my equal, my queen, and the woman who saved every wolf in this room while most of you pretended she didn't exist." He lifted our joined hands, not possessive, not performative, declarative, as simple and inarguable as gravity. I was a king on a throne. She made me a king worth following. Theron moved first, drew his blade, knelt, one knee, head bowed. The formal allegiance, not to the king alone but to us both. Sarah followed, then the warriors. Then the advisors, one by one, the heavy-set skeptic last and slowest but kneeling nonetheless. The sound of 200 wolves bending their knees filled the hall like the rush of a tide. Not perfect, not universal, but real, more than enough. I looked at Arlo. His face was composed for the room, kingly, the mask in place, but through the bond I felt what was underneath. Relief, the bone-deep, staggering, devastating relief of a man who had carried the weight of the world alone for so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to set it down. I squeezed his hand. He squeezed back.
Amy. She stood beside my throne, not at its base, not in chains, beside it. A chair had been placed there, not iron, not rough-hewn, but solid, built, a seat of its own. The court had changed. It would keep changing. There would be wolves who resented her, who questioned the bond, who tested the new arrangement. I didn't care. I'd built a kingdom out of fear because I believed that was all I deserved. I'd ruled alone because I believed that was all I could survive. I'd been wrong. The woman sitting beside my throne, the one who'd shared bread with me when the world thought me a monster, who'd sat in chains and refused to be invisible, who'd saved my kingdom with the life I'd tried to erase. She was the proof. Not a weakness, never a weakness, the only strength that had ever mattered.
The bolt at the base of the throne was still there. I'd asked if he wanted it removed. He'd said no. "Let it stay," he told me. "Let everyone who sits in this hall see it. Let it remind them, and me, of the worst mistake a king can make, and the hardest thing he can do to fix it." I traced my fingers over the empty bolt. Cold iron, a scar in the stone. I'd sat at a table once with a man everyone else was afraid of. I'd pushed bread across the wood. I'd given him my name. I'd chosen him then. I chose him now. And he, finally, irrevocably, with the full weight of his wolf and his crown and his terrified, magnificent heart, had chosen me back. The hall held, the kingdom held, and at the base of the throne where I'd once been chained, the bolt sat empty, a monument to the space between what fear makes us do and what love makes us brave enough to. If this story caught your attention, thank you for staying with me. Stories like this take heart to write, and knowing someone is truly listening makes all the difference. I write to stir something inside you, romance, emotion, and moments that linger long after the story ends. If you enjoy stories like this, please subscribe and comment where you are watching from, so these stories don't get lost in a sea of voices, and I can keep writing them for you.